Hey, welcome back to Hardwall. That was President Obama talking to Chuck Todd today about the jobs crisis in this country. Do unemployment benefits discourage people from looking for work? Many Republicans are making that argument as Senate Democrats push to extend jobless benefits for more than 3 million Americans who will stop receiving government checks this month. Jeffrey Miron is a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies at Harvard University, also a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. And Christian Weller is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and a public policy professor at the University of Massachusetts. Gentlemen, I want you to hear what I consider in my day job to be radio gold. You're about to hear the words of the Republican candidate for governor in my home state of Pennsylvania. His name is Tom Corbett. He is currently the state's attorney general. Listen to this.
The jobs are there. But if we keep extending unemployment, people are just going to sit there and, I mean, I've literally had construction companies tell me I can't get people to come back to work until they said we'll come back when unemployment runs out.
Now, Jeffrey, all I need do, as I did this morning, is play that tape, sit back, every telephone line illuminates, people are passionate, they're evenly divided, and they all have anecdotal information as to whether he's correct or he's incorrect. So who's got it right?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to split the baby, but they're both correct. There certainly are lots of firms that are hiring. There are lots of possibilities for many people to get jobs. But in order to do so, many of the people unemployed will have to accept a lower wage or a different type of occupation or moving to a different part of a country, doing something that's not nearly as pleasant and not as remunerative as what they were doing before. So, yes, they're both right. You can get jobs, but it's harder. It's not pleasant. Most people don't want to do that. And if they can get unemployment insurance, that's going to reduce their incentive to do those things that would help them to get a new job faster.
Christian, he's not alone in saying that. Senator John Kyle is another who has made a similar pitch. I want you to hear what Senator Kyle said a couple of months ago.
If anything, continuing to pay people unemployment compensation is a disincentive for them to seek new work.
So I guess my question, Christian, for you is, at what point do unemployment benefits, if at all, at what point do they become a deterrence to going out and getting a job? At no point? At 12 months? At 24 months? Where would you draw the line?
Clearly, at some point, they will make a difference, but not in this environment. We have about more than 14 million people looking for jobs, and there is about 5 job seekers for every job opening. So there's millions of people who are looking, a lot of people who don't even get unemployment benefits, but a lot of people who are looking for jobs and just simply can't find them. So I think extending unemployment benefits makes sense. It's a win-win-win proposition. It helps the most vulnerable people in this economy, those who are suffering the most through this economic hurricane. It will put more money into the private sector, boost economic demand, sales, which businesses are most worried about at this point, and ultimately protect the private sector momentum that we have. So clearly, this is the right policy going forward, given how high unemployment is and how many people are looking for jobs, and given how many more million people have given up looking because they can't find jobs.
Jeffrey, how about the argument that many have advanced, which says that consumer spending is where we need a boost, and by paying unemployment benefits, we'll be putting money in people's pockets who can go out and increase their spending power. Do you find that persuasive?
I think it's a problematic argument. It is a very standard argument. It's part of the classic Keynesian model. And if you only look at that half of it, it sounds right. Certainly, if the unemployed have more cash, they'll go out and they'll buy more things than they otherwise would. That sounds good. But you have to ask where that cash came from. Came from other parts of the economy, from other taxpayers. So those other taxpayers have less money to spend. Okay? And so you have to then convince yourself that somehow, if you get the timing just right, you can con people into spending more now and not focusing on the fact that they're going to have to pay for it with higher taxes later. That's a not very convincing argument, and it's not one that seems to be very well supported by the data. So I don't think it's a very good argument for unemployment insurance. The only good argument is...
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Christian. Yeah, respond quickly.
I mean, the main issue here is that unemployment benefit dollars actually create a lot of economic value. They're probably the most efficient ways of the government spending money. Every dollar that you spend from in unemployment insurance creates $1.6 in economic value. That's better than anything else we know.
Jeffrey, I want to introduce another related subject, and it's the deficit. You know this argument. In fact, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman wrote, "But won't extending unemployment benefits worsen the budget deficit?" And he said, yes, slightly. But as I and others have been arguing at length, penny pinching in the midst of a severely depressed economy is no way to deal with our long-run budget problems. And penny pinching at the expense of the unemployed is cruel as well as misguided. Respond to what Professor Krugman had to say.
Well, I basically think what he's saying is on target, if perhaps leading to a slightly wrong impression. The amount of unemployment insurance benefits we're talking about is teeny compared to our debt, to the debt that's going to be due to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. The long-term problems that Krugman was referring to are huge, and because they're growing at astronomical rates, and unemployment insurance is a very, very teeny part of that. The only way in which I think he's a little bit misfocused is we never seem to get around to doing the cutting that will help to reduce the deficit. And so if he were really pushing now for saying, let's start cutting Medicare and Medicaid, even though we don't make big cuts yet, then I'd be totally in agreement with him. But I don't hear him saying any of that part.
Christian Weller, at what point does paying unemployment benefits, if at all, impede self-reliance?
Well, I think clearly once you get to very low unemployment rates, it will impede some economic activity. It will be a disincentive. But generally, we have cut unemployment, the extensions, we've stopped the extensions in the past of unemployment benefits at much lower unemployment rates. In the 1980s, we stopped it at an unemployment rate of 7.2%. We're at 9.5% at this point. So we're nowhere near where we were in the past. And I think talking about the current extensions of unemployment benefits as a disincentive to look for a job is somewhat cynical, given how many millions of people are looking for a job, how few job openings there are, how long people have already struggled, and how slow we are in terms of creating new jobs and getting the unemployment rate down.
Jeffrey, on the subject of the poor, Rand Paul, who's a candidate for the United States Senate in the great state of Kentucky, said something that has caused a controversy. Let's all listen together.
The poor in our country are enormously better off than the rest of the world. Doesn't mean we can't do better, but we have to acknowledge and be proud of our system of capitalism, be proud of our American way.
Did Rand Paul get it right, Jeffrey Miron?
Well, he got it absolutely right. If you look at data that every economist would agree to, there are people in the world living on $1 a day or $2 a day. The standard of living of people who are regarded as very poor in the U.S. is certainly enormously above the standard of living in many, many parts of the world. That doesn't mean we shouldn't also have compassion for the people who are poor here, but he's certainly right to suggest some moderation in our perspective to realize that being poor in the U.S. is not the same as being poor in India.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that's what he said. If he said that to be poor in the United States is better than to be poor elsewhere, I don't think there'd be a controversy. Perhaps I didn't hear him clearly. I think he was saying that to be poor in the United States is frankly to be better anywhere else you might be in the world, which we'd all disagree with.
Oh, absolutely. That was certainly way too strong if that's what he meant. I didn't quite hear it that way, but you may be right.
All right. Men, thank you so much for being here. Jeffrey Miron and Christian Weller, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.